Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Please accept my obeisances. I'm very happy to see you all. Hare Krishna. So, today we are reading the Canto 5 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 14, Material World as the Great Forest of Enjoyment. Text 16-17.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Карабаджан Прабhu, прочитай, пожалуйста, санскрит.
Karabhajana Prabhu, can you please read the Sanskrit text?
Kvachit kala vishamita raja kula Rākṣasa pahrita priyatama dhanasu pramritaka iva vigata jiva lakshana aste.
Перевод текста.
So the translation of the text.
Государственные чиновники
Government men
во все времена
are always
подобны ракшасам,
like
кровожадным
carnivorous demons called Rākṣasas,
То есть всегда, в любое время,
man-eaters. It means always,
суток,
any time of the
в
year,
любую эпоху.
of the day, in any epoch,
Такое тут
in any
описание.
era.
Вот такая у них неблагодарная роль.
So that, what kind of unfavorable role they have
Бывает,
to
что
play.
эти чиновники набрасываются на
Sometimes
обусловленную
these
душу
government men turn
и
against the
отнимают у нее
conditioned
все
soul
сбережения,
and take away all his accumulated
лишившись
wealth,
денег,
being
которые она копила,
bereft of his life's reserved wealth.
обусловленная душа
The
уже
conditioned
исторгла.
soul loses all
И кажется, будто
enthusiasm.
жизнь покинула ее.
Indeed, it is as though he loses his life.
Иногда здесь говорится, да?
You see,
Так,
sometimes it says, sometimes it happens.
Бывает так.
So it happens.
Ну,
So,
слово «бывает» означает, что
but you see, this phrase, it happens, means that, you know, it might happen to someone, but someone can just get away.
ну, то есть можно сказать,
with
что в
it.
одной жизни бывает, а в другой
So you
жизни
can
может
say
быть не
that it might
бывает.
happen
Но
in
в
this
какой-то
life, but
жизни
it will not
бывает.
happen in another
Потому что речь
life.
идет не о какой-то одной жизни,
So
да,
it's not
удачной,
just about one
или
successful
неудачной,
life or
а в целом о
unsuccessful life,
картине материального
but in
существования.
general, the picture of a material existence.
Если мы видим, что с кем-то это бывает,
If we see it happens
значит,
to
с нами тоже
someone,
это может случиться,
that
должно
means it
случиться.
might happen to us as well, and it must happen
Это
actually.
закон, вращающийся,
So this is
цикличный
the
закон,
law,
и касается
the
всех.
rotating
Это как
cyclic
смерть
law that
также.
touches upon everyone.
С кем-то бывает, а с кем-то сейчас не бывает. Но
So
закон
this
для
is
всех.
like death.
Все равно это так или иначе
It will
случится.
happen to everyone. Sooner or
Ну,
later,
вот так нужно понимать.
it's going to happen to everyone.
Материалисты думают,
You have to
с кем-то бывает, но не со мной.
understand it this way.
Я разумный
The
человек,
materialists
я могу
think
планировать,
that,
могу как-то
you know, it might happen to someone else, but not to
предвидеть
me.
такие обстоятельства.
I can
Ну,
foresee
рассчитывает
such
на свои способности
circumstances, and
человек,
he counts on
иллюзии.
his abilities, being totally illusioned.
Но даже самые сильные люди совершали ошибки.
But even the strongest
Любой
men,
человек подвержен
they used to
ошибкам.
commit mistakes. Every
Обману
person
и
is
так далее.
prone to making
И
mistakes,
вот чиновники,
to
они
being
всегда
deceived,
есть
and so on.
в любом государстве. Не то, что
You
вот
see,
бывает,
these
что есть
government
чиновники,
men,
бывает, что нет
they're
чиновников.
always exist
Они
in any
внимательно
kind of
смотрят,
government,
кто как
country,
развивается экономически. Это главная их задача.
so they observe carefully
И не
at the ones
позволяют
that
слишком
develop
сильного
economically,
развития.
and they do
Там
not
иногда
allow
национализировать, иногда как-то
them to
договаривать,
develop
иногда
economically too
налоги,
much.
то есть они следят, чтобы вот
So they just watch
чтобы
over
они
us.
тоже процветали, не только богатые люди, но и чиновники тоже хотят процветать.
So the
не
government
занимаясь
man, they
бизнесом.
always want to prosper without doing
Они
anything,
набрасываются
actually.
иногда на людей,
So sometimes they attack
находят,
rich
конечно, повод,
people.
сначала повод,
Of course, they
нужно, когда повод
find
найден, они
the reason
безжалостно
to attack them,
отбирают у него практически все.
and they take away almost everything. So that rich man, he goes to a prison.
Любой бизнес, он
And well, matter of fact, if
не может быть
we
абсолютно
talk about it
честным.
openly,
Лишь нужно найти повод,
any
и
business cannot be
можете забирать деньги.
fair to the full extent. So there's always
Эти
something
чиновники, которые здесь сравнивают
to
с
put this
демонами,
person to a prison.
людоедами,
So these government men are
наносят такие вот
prepared
травмы людям. безжалостны.
Unlike carnivorous demons here,
Комментарий Шрилы Прабхупады. Особого внимания в этом стихе
they compared to
слова
Rākṣasas.
Раджа
So the
Кула
purport,
Ракшаса.
the word Rajakula Rākṣasa is very
Сримад
significant here.
Бхагаватам был составлен около
Srimad
5000
Bhagavatam was
лет назад.
compiled
И
about
даже в те
5,000
времена
years ago,
государственных чиновников
yet government men
сравнивали с Ракшасами,
are referred to
демонами,
as
медведями.
Rākṣasas or carnivorous
Если
demons.
чиновники ополчатся против кого-нибудь,
If government
они
men are
отберут у
opposed
него
to a person,
все
that person will be
сбережения,
bereft of all
которые он
his
копил долгие годы.
riches, which he has accumulated with great
Обычно
care
никто не хочет
over a
платить
long
подоходный
period of
налог.
time. Actually, no one wants
Даже
to pay
сами
income
сборщики
taxes.
налогов
Even
пытаются уклоняться
government
от его
men
уплаты.
themselves try to avoid these taxes.
Однако бывают трудные времена,
But at
когда государство
unfavorable
взимает
times,
налоги,
income taxes are exacted
когда все
forcibly,
налогоплательщики
and the
погружаются в
tax
уныние.
payers become very morose.
Ну, вот это называется дефолт, да?
So this is called default. Is it true?
Валюты.
Like the
В
collapse,
90-х годах это случилось.
with currency? It happened in the 90s, remember?
80 тысяч рублей.
So remember, someone gave us
Вот.
80,000 rubles,
Деньги сегодня будет примерно около 100 тысяч
so
долларов.
we will sacrifice this amount of
Может,
money.
больше.
So calculating
Чтобы мы построили храм,
to
на
these
эти деньги
times,
можно было
it would be
совершенно
about
спокойно построить храм.
$100,000. We could easily build a temple
Но
back
дефолт
then,
произошел.
but there was a
Мы
default.
потеряли всё.
We lost everything.
Это был пример. Не только мы, но вся
Not only we,
страна
but the whole country lost a lot of
почувствовала
money.
это вот падение, значит,
It felt this collapse,
разрушение. И много было
this
самоубийств,
destruction.
было
So there were a lot of
самоубийств, то есть
suicides,
очень было сложное время.
there were a lot of hooligans
Человека.
out in the streets.
Поэтому так случается с каждым. в какие-то
So it
трудные
might happen
времена.
to anyone
Каждый
during
человек
hard times,
чувствует, что трудно ему жить, богато, но везде
Every
это неважно,
person
потому что
feels
опирается всё на
that it's hard
если война
to
или
survive
какая-то
during such
перестройка
times.
идёт, то все
If there's a
население,
war,
оно
some
обеспокоено,
reconstruction of the
страдает всегда.
economy, all the people suffer.
В этом случае вот чиновничий аппарат
In
строит
this
планы,
case,
как отобрать вот
this
эти деньги,
governmental
как
apparatus,
удержать,
it
экономику в
plots
равновесии,
its way
как не
to
проиграть, да, не разрушить страну.
take the money away from people.
Вот такие вещи здесь описываются.
So these things are
5000 лет назад Прабхупада говорит,
described
вот
here.
это
Even
всегда,
5,000
это
years
всегда
ago,
существует,
Prabhupada
всегда
says.
эта проблема есть.
So it's always been here. These economical problems, they have
Трудные
always
времена
been
это не
here.
только войны, это также
Hard times, not only wars,
засухи,
but also some
или
dry
наводнения,
weather or
что
flooding.
еще, стихийные бедствия, да, социальные какие-то
See some
дисбалансы
natural
социальных
disasters.
равновесий, когда люди просто вот не хотят, не соглашаются с правительством или плохой
So there are some times that
тоже
people
возникает дисбаланс.
do not just agree with the
Трудные
government.
времена, войны также, да, стычки какие-то
So of
локальные
course,
или
during the hard
большие.
times, we might have
На
some
протяжении всего
wars.
времени вот этих 5000 лет Кали-юги, они не утихают.
But you know, during all these 5 years of Kali Yuga,
Что это случайно бывает иногда.
they just don't go away so simply.
То есть это закон материального
It's a
существования.
law of a material existence.
Закон Тамаса.
It's a law
Есть
of
закон
Tamas.
Раджаса, есть закон
So there's a
Саттвы,
law
есть
of
закон
Rajas,
Тамаса. И вот
Sattva,
все
and
эти
Tamas.
законы, как бы, они есть.
So all these laws, they
Низшие гуны
exist.
преобладают, как
And the
правило.
lower gunas, they are prevail.
Поэтому нельзя, как бы, полагаться
So
на
that's why you
какой-то
cannot
счастливый случай в
just
своей жизни. Нужно заслужить.
rely
И
on
это
something
заслуга
that you
чисто
don't deserve. You
духовная,
have to
то, что
deserve it.
чиновники не могут отобрать.
You have to deserve it spiritually. Something that the government men cannot take away from you.
Человека никто не может отобрать.
So this
Никакой
knowledge, if
чиновник,
you have some knowledge, it cannot be
несчастье,
taken away from
даже
you.
смерть, человек обретает
And
качество,
happiness,
разум,
death,
знания,
well,
это всегда
some
пример.
qualities that you have, some intelligence that you have. So this is your true
Государственного какого-то
wealth.
контроля.
It
Вот
cannot be
поэтому,
controlled by
оказывается,
anyone.
мы изучаем
So
Сримад
it's
Бхагаватам,
considered to be
противоречит
Krishna's
никаким законам.
consciousness.
Ни чиновничьим, ни государственным. И
So it's
обретаем
not
богатство,
under
которое
any
вне
laws.
контроля
You
материальных
get
гун.
something that is called wealth
То
that
есть изучаем
is not
Сримад
controlled.
Бхагаватам.
So now you see we're studying
17,
Srimad Bhagavatam.
читаю сразу перевод.
And now text 17,
Подчас обусловлена
I'll read the
душа
translation.
думает, что ее умерший отец
Sometimes the conditioned soul imagines that his father or grandfather has again come in the form of his son or
эти
grandson,
мысли
In this way, he feels the happiness one sometimes feels in a dream. And the conditioned soul sometimes takes pleasure in such mental concoctions. So Jayapataki used to say a lot about it, how our mind is powerful, how much our mind is powerful. And all our life is flowing, being controlled by our mind. So what do we feel behind the limits of our mind? No one knows. It's impossible to even imagine. So there are some definite limits. And the mind itself is also limited by the physical body. So these shores, these boundaries that the person cannot look over, are 4 demands of the physical body. They are constant, 24/7. The pressure of Maya. Food, sleeping, protection, and reproduction. So the mind is always about all these 4 categories, even unconsciously. Unconsciously means spontaneously. He just does it, but he does not even know that he's been captured in illusion. No matter how science is developed, Prabhupada says it does not go beyond all these 4 categories. So they try to search moon, sun, and other planets. So that's why they do not know what's behind. Just eating, reproducing, sleeping, protecting. See, on this earth, all these things that matter to us, they have a different meaning behind all these 4 categories. And an ordinary person is not able to understand all these things. An ordinary person is immersed in working, making money, making his way up in his life. Sometimes when you start thinking about why this is all organized in this way, why should I sleep, why should I eat, why does the life work like this? There's no answer coming, because he is rotating in all these categories. Some time passes, and then the lunchtime comes, and then the person cannot think about something elevated anymore because he has to eat some food. So then he or she sees some man or woman, the opposite gender, and then he starts thinking about something else, of course. But then he's got his family, and he postpones thinking about some elevated things. So he doesn't know why he needs to sleep, to eat, to work. Why are there so many obstacles in our lives? Why, and why? So many whys, so many questions. And all of these questions are covered in Srimad Bhagavatam. All the questions that people haven't found the answers to because of building their careers, fighting in wars, making money. It's just because of all these 4 categories. We fight for these 4 categories. Sleep, sleeping, protection, reproducing. So even when people use some drugs, of course it's not food. It's just like alcohol. That's the other thing that people usually think of. Someone thinks that taking LSD or some kind of other drugs, they think that this is behind the body experience. They think this is something transcendental. But what do they see there? Again, everything that is connected with all these 4 categories again. Sleeping, eating, protecting, and reproducing. So if you continue watching some TV series, continuation, you see the same 4 categories again. So Prabhupada says, you see, they flying over to moon, but why? It's just to follow the same 4 categories. We sleep here just because of the law of attraction here, So we wake up at the same place that we fell asleep on. But on the moon, there's no gravity. That's why people are trying to come up with all these spaceships equipped with some safety belts. Just like Sebastianov used to tell about his own experience in space. So just imagine being in a spaceship. You fall asleep, being buckled up, you wake up, so and there are two hands just right above his face. Just imagine that. He was totally shocked, being in a spaceship, seeing all these two hands right above his head. So he was stricken, and it turned out that this was his own hands actually. So he couldn't understand that these were his own hands actually when he woke up. But you see, this is interesting how you sleep without any gravity. How do you eat without gravity? So there's no gravity, so you cannot even put any food into your plate. So these spaceships, they were talking about all these things. The way they eat, the way they sleep. Well, they didn't tell us about reproducing in space, of course, back then. But I think this would be interesting for people as well. So when you are in a space, you have to get used to a new life. So they went on the moon. They landed. So what is there? Nothing, just a desert. They say nothing is there, and they just flew back. So this is a bodily conception. We have to understand that there's nothing on the moon, or we don't see it. But the moon somehow has its influence on the earth. It means that it's not a coincidence. It has its own purpose. So there's a connection between these two planets. And also there's sun. There's some connection to the sun. But if you take a closer look, all the stars, they're all connected. Astrology is studying all these connections. And this science tells you your destiny, your past, present, and future. The location of all the stars. The time when you're born, and everything is connected. It's all connected to my personal life. So far, the science cannot tell you anything. Well, they said there's astrology, but no one cannot explain it, because they think only in the limits of all these 4 categories. Sleeping, protecting, reproducing, eating. There are so many contradictions. So that's why people say, no, I don't need Srimad Bhagavatam, otherwise how could I be in all these 4 categories? I just want to continue doing what I was doing. If I just read Srimad Bhagavatam, how do I protect myself? How do I eat, sleep, and reproduce? I will have no energy left. So they say that this is not a spiritual world, this is a material world. You see, they're so afraid of losing these associations with food, reproduction, sleep and protection. So these principles are very, very powerful. And Srimad Bhagavatam says that it's just the main principles of supporting your own body. These are not the basics of your existence. You don't have to fight for this or spend a lot of energy. If the person understands all the spiritual laws, if he understands them, he will be protected, he will be taken care of by the nature itself. Hard work is not recommended, it's actually forbidden. Only donkeys work as hard. But the person is supposed to be working just because he's happy. Not to make money and hide them away somewhere. And then to sleep. Not very sound. Because you'll be afraid of losing your money. What if someone comes and takes my money away? Or my relatives will take away my money. This is all the accumulation of money. But the sense of activity is totally different, just to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Karma, jnana, and yoga, they're all needed. And all our natural skills and inclinations, they're all needed to us just to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Even by sleeping, protection, reproducing. They all have to serve to satisfy God. We have to serve God. So you sleep, you reproduce, some other things, protect yourself. But there's a higher sense to all that. And the fifth component is the super soul. So we invite the super soul into our lives. So in such a way, through Srimad Bhagavatam, if someone wants to hear the super soul, you have to listen to Shastras. The deeper you hear, the deeper you actually enter this knowledge. The more, or the better you hear your Paramatma in your heart. The Paramatma in your heart. The intelligence should get Shastras, compulsory. Otherwise your mind will not be overwhelmed, will not be defeated by your intelligence. So all these arguments designed for your mind cannot refuse all these facts. It can refuse anything except Bhagavatam, because this is the absolute truth. Our mind is simply not able to comprehend all this. So that's why people say, come on, this is a religious sect. They just try to protect themselves. But the matter of fact, a person should get this spiritual knowledge with the help of his intelligence, not from mind. This is called Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi Yoga gives you the truth. If the person reads Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, of course, this knowledge, it may contradict our habits, our mind, but it is said that it's good. So your attachment to all these four categories is just a disease. And now, in order to persuade your mind, there's an allegory how the material existence is organized, is arranged, from life to life. Sometimes we think that, I'm quite successful in this life, and I don't need to read all these texts. But well, yeah, that's okay, but you're not going to be living forever. Sooner or later, you will have to change your body. And even if you consider yourself to be successful in this life, you never know what's going to happen to you in your next life. How can you say that you're going up in this life, but not going down? Can you say that you're going to be happy in your next life, living in civilized life? There's no guarantee, because we have fallen down. The morale is going down. There's no morality, some spiritual qualities, no knowledge. How can a person can elevate? Because the elevation is work. It's a great effort. That's the greatest effort. That's why a person should not work as a donkey. Because he already has some austerity. To get rid of all these attachments. And to persuade mind in this, you have to be reading these stories, these commentaries, these purports every day. Chant mantra every day. Well, yes, it is challenging. Do it until your mind touches upon Krishna. And that's when this spontaneity comes into your life. You will be attracted by the pastimes of Krishna spontaneously. You will find a taste in this, and this austerity will become ecstatic for you. Everything that is hard for you in the spiritual life, matter of fact, is ecstatic when there is contact, when your mind is pure. The spiritual life is not such a hard labor. It is spontaneous. It gives you happiness. Even if you think that you work so hard, but it's not so actually. There'll be a lot of an internal work, but not the physical one. Well, yeah, we have a lot of duties, of course, while developing the Krishna's consciousness movement. It's a very heavy burden. But you see, devotees are happy when they do something, when they succeed in doing something. And Krishna is very happy. You will be paid off, believe me. Everything will pay it off. So Prabhupada says about just an ordinary worker, he says that when he meets his wife, and they go to bed, they love each other, they also have this stimulus of sexual enjoyment, that this is a material example. So people do it just to forget about all these obstacles. Only sex sometimes distracts people. Working so hard, they enjoy it. But if it's a spiritual life, your soul is put into the ocean of a bliss, of an enjoyment. In order to go back to God, you have to live probably for billions of lives. You have to suffer so much that it's even impossible to describe. But when you face God, this is always paid off several times. No material enjoyment is not capable of being compared to what you will have in the future as an end. So the presence of God cannot be compared to any material enjoyment. You see, we're not just criticizing the material existence here, but we're giving the vector. As Jayapataki, he's talking about it in a transcendental condition. Just like Vyasadeva was reading all the Vedas in a transcendental condition. So these are the questions to all the, these are the answers to all the questions. Liberated souls, they were writing all this material information. They know how to open up the truth before people, although it's really hard, especially for a mind, to agree with all this information. Sometimes they become enemies to their own souls. But okay, if you think that there will be a lot of enemies, and you will see there will be a lot of obstacles while preaching, you will not escape all these difficulties. It's not like your material life is without difficulties. Read this chapter, analyze the years that you have lived already, you will understand that this is all true. Do not hope that everything is going to change in the future. It's always been like that. 5,000 years ago it was written down, and nothing has changed in the material world since then. The fact that forms are changing does not give us any changes. Power does not open. Either you have a telephone, you don't, doesn't matter, you're still in ignorance. Just pretending that you're a civilized man when you just talk over your phone. This is just food for thought. But matter of fact, we still have so many problems in our material life. So don't think that there are fewer problems in your material life than in the spiritual life. No, it's not so. In a spiritual life, you can get over all the obstacles compared to the physical life, to the material life. Even if we get over some obstacles in material life, even when we succeed, all these samskaras, they still, all these cornerstones, they still remain with us. You cannot get away with them. You will still continue living with some of the offense that you had in the past. Everyone is offended in this life, and no one knows that this is a grave disease. Either it's a child or an old man, no one is satisfied in this life. Everyone is looking for something else to become happy. There's so competition between people right now. brothers, sisters, parents. There's a disease of a subtle body. Our mind should be liberated.
У меня или у всех?
It seems like
Это у всех.
the picture is frozen, so I think we're all having the same problem.
Слабый интернет.
That's probably over poor internet connection.
Сейчас слышно меня?
Can you hear me now?
Сейчас да.
Yes, we can.
Сейчас
Сейчас
слышно.
слышно?
Сейчас слышно, да.
Yes, we can
слышно.
hear you.
Так, можно говорить. Да? Алло. Слышит, подними руку, пожалуйста.
Can you raise your hands if you
Сейчас
can hear me?
слышно.
Как правильно? Наверное, что-то со слухом.
There must be, but the hearing of the devotees.
Интернет у меня всегда.
My internet is always good. We have these modern technologies.
Бою, это же гарантия. Что-то либо они принципиально не хотят слушать.
Maybe you just don't want to listen to me anymore.
К сожалению, интернет слабый.
Yeah,
Hello?
unfortunately.
Сейчас слышно. А вот сейчас нормально.
Я вот тут рассуждаю с преданными, либо
You see, I was just talking to the devotees present here. It's either with the internet or with the hearing of devotees.
и мы пришли к выводу, что интернет-то у нас
So we have concluded that our internet,
понимаете,
you know, it's always good.
достижение последнее.
It's a great
Не может
achievement
зависеть.
of our civilization and
Со
cannot
слухом, похоже, преданно, что ли.
keep us up.
По слухам,
Give us
да,
that.
есть над чем работать.
So probably there's
Интернет
something
тоже
with your
похож.
hearing. But, you know,
Нет, интернет это гарантия.
internet is a guarantee.
Интернет это гарантированный успех. А вот
Materialists
со слухом что-то у преданных.
tell us that it's a guarantee
Поэтому мы вот пришли к этому выводу.
success.
Преданные не хотят слушать,
So we have just concluded that the devotees, they do not want to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam.
Но интернет, похоже, здесь чиновников описывалось в предыдущем стихе.
So
Какие-то
see, we were just
похоже, они
describing the government and man, so probably
Интернет,
they are just trying to play their tricks on us right now.
но что-то же интернет проведет все равно. Так, по чуть-чуть, по чуть-чуть.
So you
Что-то
see,
проникнет.
little by little, step by step, we will hear
Одну
something.
вещь я заметил в материальном мире, что есть очень сильные люди,
So one thing that I've noticed in the material world,
но они беззащитны все же перед обществом, вот, в лесу материального
there are some
существования.
people that are not
Есть сильные
protected,
личности,
that are
правители,
totally
как бы мистики,
with no protection in this material world,
сами по
like
себе
in the
сильные
forest.
люди. Но они не выдерживают критики,
They're
нападок,
strong,
потом финансовых вот этих
but
отношений.
they cannot tolerate any criticism, any attacks.
Иметь деньги. И они остаются беззащитны, потому что
And
у
they
них нет
stay unprotected
защиты свыше.
because they have no
Они
protection
полагаются
from
только на свои
above. They
силы,
only
силы
rely
и в
on
конце
their own
концов они,
forces,
конечно, все
and
слабеют,
finally
слабеют,
they all
разочаровываются в жизни.
become weak.
У меня есть одна книга
They get
священника, он
disappointed
уже
in their
умер.
lives. So there's one book that I have,
Этот священник был такой очень интересный, и
written by a
он знал
saintly
преданных, он очень
person.
хорошо к преданным относился, этот человек,
He knew devotees very well,
православный священник. У меня есть
so he
книга
was
с
an
стихами.
orthodox holy father.
Талантливый, там его рисунки,
So he's very
стихи,
talented. There are some
что-то
pictures of
еще.
his,
Были какие-то
some
истории о
verses
нем,
that
там
he
книгу
had written
издали,
down,
несколько человек,
some
которые его
history,
очень любили.
historical facts, and he was
Был такой честный,
very loved by
набожный
people. He was
человек.
very fair, very
Но знаете, что
religious.
с ним случилось?
But look what had
Он
happened to
умер,
him.
собственно говоря, от депрессии.
He died of depression,
Ну, если так говорить, о какой-то
if
причине
you
главной,
put
важной.
it these
Я
words, in
посмотрел
these
книгу,
words.
стихи очень
So I
талантливые.
took a look at
Эта
his
книга
book.
есть.
He's
Иногда
very
я даже
talented.
почитываю эти стихи его.
Sometimes I
Они
still
такие
read
духовные,
his verses.
знаете,
They're very spiritual,
смыслом.
filled with the sense.
И я видел его картинки.
So I
Сначала хронологически выстроенные.
saw his pictures chronologically placed there,
И начало
and
было
his
это
verses
как
as well.
сияние солнца,
So the
знаете.
beginning was like the
Много
shining of
радости, это
sun,
вера,
a lot of
знаете, это
happiness,
Бог, это
faith,
душа,
God,
это
soul.
прекрасно, это молитва, прекрасно.
So wonderful, actually, the prayers.
И год за годом
And then
это
year
состояние
after year,
менялось,
this
больше, больше,
mood
больше
was
и больше.
changing more and
Некоторые
more.
стихи вы просто плакать будете.
And some of his
То
verses,
есть там такая боль,
you'll
такая
be just
трагедия,
crying.
всё
There's
это
so much
правда,
pain in
человек
there,
это всё переживает,
so
он
much
не
tragedy.
защищен от этой жестокости,
You
от
just
этих
feel
пороков.
that this person is
Когда
not protected
проповедник, он
at
священник,
all.
он это
Father,
можно вообще. Невозможно преодолеть этот океан
and he
пороков,
said that
невежества.
it's totally
И его картинки меняются,
not
стихи
possible
меняются,
to
в конце
overcome all
концов.
these sins.
Страшные картинки все.
And then even his pictures are changing in the end of his
Это человек
picture.
верующий,
Then this person
смотрите.
just dies. You see,
Один
this was
не
a believing
выдерживает.
person. He
Если
couldn't
мы с вами
just
в одиночку будем проповедовать, сознание
he
Кришны,
couldn't
произойдет
just
то
take
же
it
самое.
alone.
И Господь Чайтанья говорит, Санкиртана, будьте вместе.
So the Lord Chaitanya says,
Вместе воспевайте,
when you have
вместе проповедуйте,
Sankirtana,
вместе всё организуйте,
chant
вместе всё
together,
планируйте.
organize
Поддержите друг
together,
друга
plan
вместе.
together, support each other.
Санкиртана ягья.
Do it all
Вот
together.
как важно это.
Sankirtana Yaga, that's why how
Потому
much
что этот
it is
лес не
important.
пересечь в одиночку.
Just because you cannot cross this
Лес
forest
материального
alone,
существования. Там вообще в лесу, значит,
the forest
люди
of the
долго,
material
далеко не могут продвинуться.
existence, you cannot
Я был
go
в джунглях
far when you're in the forest. So I've been to the jungles,
Там маршрут проложен был только по реке, по
and there
камням
was
реки, по лесу невозможно. Вы не
a
сможете
path
за 1 километр.
just along the river, but not
Если это
inside
лес.
the forest. We
Там
couldn't even go
такие джунгли,
with 1
дорожки,
kilometer through
там
the
также
forest.
звери, там
There
много
were jungles
препятствий,
with animals,
колючек
a
и
lot of obstacles,
насекомых, и
some
клещей,
thorns
о,
and
боже мой.
insects.
Там даже остановиться негде будет.
We wouldn't be
Вот
even
столько
able
беспокойств
to
в лесу.
make a halt in
То есть в
there.
лесу даже мы далеко не уйдем. Мы,
Too many
знаете, на одной
obstacles.
проблеме можем остановиться в этой жизни
So
с
when in
этими
the
чиновниками и
forest
до конца
of the
своих
material
дней судиться, и
existence,
всё.
you may have just one
И
problem
никуда,
and you
понимаете, никуда.
may never get over this.
Даже квадратного километра не пройдем. Понимаете? А у нас нужно лес пересечь, понимаете, океан
And
пересечь.
here you see in our
А акула всплыла, и все, вы не
our
знаете.
task is to cross the whole forest by ourselves.
Вот такая вот картина,
This
видите,
material
безжалостная
existence.
картина.
See, this picture is really pitiless.
Мы прочитали с вами 17-й текст,
So we've read
читали комментарий к нему, небольшой.
text
Читаю.
17,
Да, и в этом стихе говорится,
and there's a
что
little
человек
purport
иногда
to
думает,
it.
что его родственники,
So
да,
in this
умершие,
text it is said that
воплощаются как песни,
sometimes
внуки.
his
Это
ancestors,
как-то
they
счастье приносит
incarnate as
фантазия.
his present relatives, and it
Не
pacifies him
зная о высшей реальности, о Господе,
due to the ignorance of the real existence of the Lord.
всевозможными выдумками.
The conditioned soul,
Занимаясь
imagined many
кармической
things.
деятельностью, они встречаются и становятся
influenced by fruitive
друг
activity,
другу отцами,
he comes together with
сыновьями,
his relatives,
дедами,
fathers,
подобно тому,
sons
как
and grandfathers,
сталкиваются соломинки,
exactly as straws gather together in a
несколько
moving stream.
мгновений соломинки
In a moment,
разбросают
the
разные стороны.
straws are thrown
И они
everywhere
никогда больше не
and they
встретятся.
lose contact.
Находясь в обусловленном
In
состоянии,
conditional life,
душа вступает в
the living
различные
entity is
отношения с другими
temporarily
обусловленными
with
душами.
many other conditioned souls.
Однако эти отношения не
They
вечны.
gather together,
Такие
as
души
family
становятся
members,
членами одной
and the material
семьи,
affection is
и
so
между ними
strong
возникают
that even after a
очень
father
прочные
or
материальные
grandfather
привязанности.
passes away,
Из
one
этих привязанностей
takes
некоторые
pleasure in
люди
thinking
думают,
that they return
что
to the
их
family in
умерший
different
отец
forms.
или дед
Sometimes
снова
this may
родился в
happen,
их семье.
but in any case, the conditioned,
Иногда такое в самом деле происходит.
in any case, the
Но даже
conditioned
если это
soul
не так, обусловленная душе
likes
нравится
to take
тешить себя
pleasure
подобными мыслями.
in such
Такие сильные
concocted
привязанности,
thoughts.
что люди очень болезненно
It's just
переживают
such strong attachments that people
уход
they
своих
really
родственников или близких.
suffer when
И где они находят утешение? Вот здесь говорится, одно из утешений,
the-
они думают,
some of
что
the
они
relatives
воплощаются
pass away.
снова у нас, как
that's why they think that we still have
это
these
тоже
relatives
бывает так.
incarnated
Бывает так.
as our present
Это не
relatives.
меняет картины, видите.
Yeah,
Только
it does
упал
happen, but
успокоение всего лишь
it
навсего.
just pacifies your mind.
Итак, эти привязанности, видите, насколько
So
они
these
могущественны.
attachments, they're so
Даже
powerful
когда мы исчезаем с лица
that even
земли,
when we
то
disappear from the face of this earth,
они проникают в душу, опутывают ее.
see, we still have these attachments. They get into our soul
Волокут за нити этих
and they
привязанностей.
envelop it. So these
Различные
attachments,
существа,
they
которые
drag our
не
soul
могут спасти нашу жизнь,
somewhere.
нашу душу. Они уволокут эти
Something that
привязанности,
cannot even
они связывают друг друга,
save us, cannot
разрывают,
help us.
снова привязываются к другим. Едва
So we attach
разорвав
to so
что-то,
many
и новую
things.
привязанность, от которой жить
If
невозможно
you've
в
just
этом
broken
мире.
some attachment, you get yourself attached to
фантазий,
something else because we have so
Ума мы не
many
выживем.
fantasies of our mind, we will not just survive. So you have to know that this is my close relatives. A mind should always have some bodily attachment. We do not know the soul, but we do know what the body is. So that's why we are so attached to this body. And we've come to understand what the soul is. If we had done that, we would have been rescued. If we think about Prabhupada while dying, we'll be saved, because we are the soul but not the body. The same with our relatives. If they think about the soul but not, they'll be saved and they'll save all the ancestors. So, just the problem is that our soul is dragged through all this forest of the material existence, and that's why we suffer. We come across so many tribulations in this world just because we are attached to so many different things. You'll be thinking, yes, my dad had died, but now his reincarnation. But the point is that your father in this life will not liberate your soul anyway. So the point is that no one should be a father or a spiritual master or a king in this life, because you cannot liberate your soul in this life anyway. So we are designed to live here just to get liberated. When a father teaches his son, he shows himself the God, but not himself. If you work well, if you work hard, you'll get some inheritance from me. No, you have to show God. That's why he brings his children to a spiritual master that will tell them that they're not this physical body. He asks you something that you're attached to, something against some relationships, but he will not break these relationships ever. Spiritual knowledge does not break any relationships. It only breaks all these attachments. All these attachments, they create an illusion, some attachments. But matter of fact, people just torture each other. I'm attached to you just because I want something from you. We don't really want to make dreams come true of other people, make other people's dreams come true. You have to have love to God, love to your soul. Body is a good instrument. We respect our body because the soul is living there. This is a totally different culture, a totally world of relationships that are not contradictory to our happiness. There's no spiritual contradiction if you are a devotee. You only have a contradiction when you're not a devotee. So if there's one devotee in the family, yeah, there's a contradiction. But if all the people are devotees, there's no contradiction. What if there are no devotees? Of course, there will be a lot of contradiction. The egoism is still there. So what should we do? We just have to go to Krishna. You cannot contradict this knowledge. If you have only experienced all these four categories of sleeping, protection, eating, and reproducing, of course you will have a lot of contradictions. But as soon as you have this spiritual knowledge, you will stop doing all the silly things in your life. So these experiences only received in the Kali age just by chanting the holy names. If you chant these holy names, you will be taken. You will be given this taste, this higher taste, more elevated taste. But the methods can be different. All these material methods, they can be different, how to preach. But the most important thing is you have to have a purpose. All the liberated souls, all Shastras, they tell us just to chant the holy names of God with love. Anything can be achieved by chanting the holy names. Don't think that you do not achieve the fruits of your karmic activity, the fruits of mystical practices. Everything is attained with help of the devotional service. And all this serves to Krishna. Money, knowledge, mystical powers.
Вот так, преданный
All they
обретает
serve
все
to Krishna.
необходимые способности
That's
для
how a devotee
квалификации.
receives all
Не
these
для себя.
needed skills,
Если для себя,
not for
он снова
himself, but
возвращается
for
в лес
God.
материального существования.
If he receives all this knowledge just for himself,
И
he
там
goes
никто
back
еще
to
не
the
выжил
forest of the
полностью.
material existence.
Даже самые сильные
No
люди
one
не
has
выживают полностью.
survived there yet,
Нам нужна
even the
защита
strongest
Верховного
ones.
Господа.
We
Он нам
need
дал эту
the Supreme
защиту
Lord's
через
protection. He has
движение
given us this
Санкиртаны,
protection
совместное
through
воспевание
the movement
Санкиртаны.
of Sankirtana.
Тут мы надежно будем защищены от
That's where
Майи,
we'll be protected safely from
от
Maya,
всех этих несчастий больших.
from all these
Потом
tribulations.
Прабхупада очень просил своих
That's why
учеников и
Prabhupada, he
преданных
used to ask his
кто
disciples
присоединится.
very genuinely
Пожалуйста, ни при каких обстоятельствах никогда не покидайте ISKCON.
not to leave ISKCON under
Не
no
делайте это.
circumstances.
В
Do not do
одиночку вы не
that.
пересечете, даже прочитав Бхагавад-гиту.
You'll not cross the... Never ever. Even if you've read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam already. Stay together. You have to stay together. Do it all together. Work together. Remind yourselves about Krishna. So we've read two texts from the canto number 5 of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 14th chapter, Material World as the Forest of Enjoyment.
Пожалуйста, сейчас вот открывается форум, вопросы и ответы, мнения,
So now let me
пожалуйста.
let's discuss this. Let me answer some of your questions.
Спасибо, Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu.
So thank you very much, Chaitanya Chandra prabhu. So there's a question.
Харе Кришна, мои поклоны, большое спасибо за
Hare
лекцию.
Krishna,
Я
my
сделаю небольшое
obeisances.
объявление.
Thank you so
Сначала,
much
дорогие преданные, кто смотрит нас на Ютубе,
for these lectures.
пожалуйста, переходите
So
по
a
ссылке в
little
описании,
announcement to all
присылайте
the
свои
devotees.
вопросы к нам в Telegram-бот.
So you can
Постараемся выделить время в конце лекции.
Send all your questions to our Telegram channel,
Вот, и я, наверное,
or you
начну
can
с
post some
вопроса.
questions here
У
on
меня такой
YouTube,
вопрос,
on
то, что
YouTube
вот
channel.
описано в 17 стихе,
And then the question is
про то, как человек
everything that is
наслаждается своими
described in the
фантазиями.
text of 17 when a
Бывают такие
person
ситуации, когда
enjoys his
рассказываешь человеку философию,
fantasies and imagination.
ну,
So
в целом
sometimes
про
when you
карму,
start
про
preaching
реинкарнацию, про Бога,
to a
его
person about karma,
как-то
reincarnation, about God,
именно вот такие вещи, как он начинает думать, кем
so
я был в
usually
прошлой
people,
жизни,
they
кем
are
мне быть следует,
attracted
и
by the
еще
things
бывает,
like
начитался исторических
who he
романов,
was in
там,
his
где вот в
previous
этой
life.
эпоху жил, а что я там делал.
So what if I
Может,
lived in
следующий
that
вопрос, что я там буду делать. Вот
age
эти люди,
in
которые
another
меня
one?
окружают, там, отец,
So they're all
родители,
interested in
там,
what they were
я
doing in their
встречался,
previous
с ним
lives.
встречался.
What if they
То
had
есть в какой-то
already
момент
met their
понимаешь, что из
relatives
всего, что ты ему пытался
that he
сказать,
has
он
in this
запомнил
life?
только вот такие вот материальные вещи.
So the only things that they
И
get
это включило
attracted
как раз
to
его фантазию,
are only material
о
things.
которой говорится в этом стихе. И вот вопрос,
So the
эта
question is,
тенденция, она как
so
вообще,
this
стоит ли ее опасаться?
tendency,
И
should we
нужно ли
be
ее преодолевать? Или как вообще к ней
worried
относиться?
about it? Should we overcome it?
Хороший вопрос. Да, но это психология,
There's a good
которая
question.
описана в этом
See,
стихе,
this is
поскольку
the
есть
psychology
привязанность, душа
that
будет
is
так думать,
described
да,
in this
как
text.
только он узнает о
But these all
реинкарнации, сразу
attachments.
начнет думать,
As soon as the
это
soul learns
как тут
about
написано, как ты
reincarnation,
сказал тоже. Начнет утешать
will
себя,
be thinking this way.
утешать себя при помощи
It will
вот
be
этих знаний,
comforting itself
а,
by this
из-за
knowledge
привязанности.
just because of the attachments.
Поэтому нам нужно знать,
So
как
that's why
доводить
we
свою
need
проповедь до
to
конца.
know how to
Это лишь начало. Человек что-то узнает
take
и
our
верит.
preaching to the very
У
end.
него еще куча материальных привязанностей, конечно.
When the
Вот вера
person
будет
starts believing, it still has a lot of
проявляться
attachments.
по-разному.
And of
Это
course,
такие
his
привязанности,
faith
поэтому он будет по-разному понимать,
will work
представлять
differently.
вопросы, утешать себя по-разному. То есть это как утешение для
He will
души.
be comforting
Как они
himself,
говорят, да? Земля тебе
comforting himself
Это
differently.
атеисты говорят, которые в Бога не верят. Но как-то же нужно утешить и родственников, и себя.
Somehow you have
Земля
to
тебе пух,
comfort
пусть тебе там будет хорошо.
your
Тебя
relatives.
уже нет, да, нет. В их понимании. Да нет, ты не
In
существуешь.
atheistic
Привязанность
understanding,
осталась, и они утешают тебя.
they still have
Хорошо,
some
нет.
attachments even after the
Но они
relatives die.
одушевляют это существо, чтобы успокоить себя.
They still,
А тут реинкарнация, о боже мой, тут даже не нужно...
when they
придумывать,
learn
что
about,
вот он существует, где-то он продолжает существовать, и вот наверняка он придет ко мне,
when they
да,
learn
я
about
по глазам узнаю,
reincarnation, they understand that,
по
oh,
глазам
so if
узнаю,
there's
что
reincarnation, there might be a chance that my
такая родилась,
past
вы
relative, he will
покупаете,
come
просто
back to
смотрите
me
и
again.
узнаете своего мужа, допустим.
When you look into your
Мой
dog's
живой,
eyes, for example, you realize that
Василий,
this
боже мой,
was
ты
your
пришел ко мне.
your former
Мой любимый
husband that
Василий,
passed
боже
away.
мой, мы снова встретились.
So wow,
Я
this is
серьезно
so
говорю.
good. I have met you again.
Ведь случаев немало.
in this
Видит
dog.
перевоплощение. По глазам узнают. Это говорит кто-то из Госвами, что по глазам можно узнать.
Sometimes, well, Goswami
Человека
say
из
that
прошлой жизни, вспомнить его.
you
заглянуть
can
в глаза его.
recognize your
Вот так вот.
husband
Есть
from your
такие
previous
способы.
lives just by looking
Ну, вот собака,
in
он
someone
приходит,
else's
лижет вам
eyes.
лицо, тоже радуется, тоже
So there's a
встретились,
dog
тоже говорит,
licking your
давно не
face, so
виделись.
happy to see you,
И вот людям нравятся такие
and
вещи,
then you
такие
realize that
привязанности.
this dog might
Только
have
это
been your
нет
husband
привязанности. Что
in
вы
his
видите?
previous life.
Боже мой.
But there's
Он
no
стал собакой, что
attachment.
ли?
You understand? Oh my
Какое
God,
несчастье.
he's become dog.
Я думал, несчастье, когда он
Such an
умер, а
happy
несчастье
thing.
еще больше, что он родился вообще.
So I thought
Собака.
that this
Не
was
вижу
bad when he
никаких
died,
шансов.
but then
Только может меня
I understand that
лицо лизать.
he's been very happy to be
Сильно.
born as a dog in this life.
Если у вас нет
So
привязанности,
now
видите,
all
по-другому
that he
картину
can do is
смотрится.
just to lick my face.
Жизнь потеряла эту ценную
When you
часть
have some
своей жизни.
knowledge, you understand that this
Потому что радости не приносит, видите, такие
entity
вещи.
has lost this human
Но
form
нужно
of life.
проповедовать до конца. Это лишь начало.
So you have
Да,
to
вот
preach until the
читают
very
только
end.
так, понимаете,
This is
вы
just the
должны
beginning.
продолжать проповедь.
You have to continue
Останавливаться на
preaching.
реинкарнации.
Don't just stop at
дальше.
reincarnation. You have to
А любить
talk
к Богу,
more.
в конце концов, должны людей
Talk
привести
about
туда,
love
пересмыслить
for
к истине,
God.
к реальному
You have to bring people to
смыслу.
the truth, to the real
Так, ну, это
sense.
фрагмент, мы говорим, да, фрагмент.
So
Так
this is
люди
just
могут
a fragment,
воспринимать, но мы должны знать, что нужно
but we
процесс
have to
продолжать,
understand that we have to
толкать дальше этот
continue
вагон.
this process. We have to
Должен
push
стоять на месте.
this
Должны планировать свою проповедь.
wagon, this cart further.
Не останавливайтесь. Если вы стали особенно уже
Don't
известным
you stop
проповедником,
here,
не останавливайтесь.
especially if you've become already
До конца,
a
пока силы есть,
famous
до конца
preacher.
Будьте последовательными
While
до
you
конца,
have
мы
this
вам
energy,
поможем.
do it until the very
Таким
end.
примером.
That's how you can help people, by this example.
Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu, вы сегодня приводили пример
Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu,
человека,
you've given us an
это
example
что
today of a
это
person.
духовный человек, и вы говорили, что
It
у вас
was a
есть книга,
spiritual
там стихи
person, as I
замечательные,
understand.
духовные. У меня остался вопрос.
So this was the
Если он,
Orthodox,
подобно в начале
the
солнцу,
Orthodox preacher.
сиял
So I have a question.
явился
In the
своими
beginning, he was very shiny,
рекомендациями,
filled with positive energy.
а потом почему в конце
And then, by the end of his
свет погас,
life,
почему он
why had
оставил
this
этот мир
light
в
dimmed?
депрессии, в одиночестве?
Why did he
Почему
leave
он
this
только
world
встал на духовный путь,
in such a depressed state of mind?
закончил?
So why does it happen
И что
to
этому предшествовало, и
people?
какова причина?
What was the reason to that?
Это очень хороший вопрос, да, чтобы нам не
Yeah,
повторить
this is
эти
a very
вещи.
good question. If you don't want to repeat
Это происходит
such
абсолютно
things,
с каждым человеком,
this may happen to
кто не обладает
each and every
достаточным
person
могуществом.
that doesn't have a lot of
Он был священником, этот
power.
человек.
So this person, he used to be a
Его,
preacher,
ну, по
like a
должности,
holy father.
как бы по дхарме, полагалось
According to
определенное
his
могущество,
dharma,
чтобы
he
людей
had
спасать
some
от
power
деградации.
to save
Но у него не
people from
хватило
degradation,
могущества. Но он
but
потерял
he
веру
lacked
в
it
людей,
because he had lost his faith
потому что не хватило сил
in
против
people.
человека.
That's just because he
Вот
lacked
какая
some
вещь.
force,
Искренне
some
начинается,
power.
если человек что-то делает,
Yeah, he
даже
started doing it
есть
very
какие-то хорошие
sincerely,
результаты, но
and
в
he even
целом
had
он
some
видит,
good
что это,
results.
ну, знаете, глазом
But in
по
general,
пустыне.
he
Ну,
sees that
бессмысленно всё это
this
делать.
is
Я
all
знал даже
senseless to
врачей
do it.
некоторых, кто бросали свою работу по этой причине.
I even knew some doctors that
Мы людей спасаем,
left their
лечим,
jobs
а они
for
потом
this
делают
reason.
то же самое. Какой смысл вообще?
They were saving people, but then when people
Они
got
хотят
better,
то,
they
что
started
слушать,
doing the
говорят,
same
вот
things
ногу
again.
вылечите, мне желудок вылечите. Он говорит, у вас образ жизни,
So
а
they
они
come
говорят,
to
нет,
this
не
doctor
надо, пожалуйста.
and they tell him that,
Просто
please
вылечите
do
мне
something
ногу,
with my
гениталии
stomach,
сделайте мне, чтобы я мог наслаждаться сексом, сколько
with
хотел.
my leg,
Я вам плачу деньги. И кто-то из врачей говорит, я не хочу
or
такого.
make some new genitals for me.
Не хочу
And
служить вот этим всем
that's why
грехам.
doctors said that I don't want to serve to all these sins anymore.
Да, я встречал таких врачей.
Yeah, I've met such doctors
И
in
они
my
не
life.
знали как. Люди не слушают их.
They just didn't know what to do because people
Просто
were not
требуют.
listening to them.
Деньги платят,
They just
требуют.
demanded them to do something, giving them some money.
Вот какая вещь. Поэтому нам нужно обрести могущество.
So that's why we have to
Прабхупада
get
проявил
this
такое могущество,
power.
да.
So
Но у
Prabhupada,
нас
he
нет
has
такого
used this
могущества. Должны
power.
быть вместе.
We don't have this power, that's why we have to
И
be
вот
together.
одна из причин того
So one of the
трагедии того
reasons of
священника,
that
он оказался
tragedy
одиноким.
of that the preacher, the Orthodox preacher, he turned out to be totally
Со
alone.
состраданием, смотрите, с такими качествами, он оказался одиноким,
With all this
беспомощным
compassion
человеком.
that he used to have,
Это
he
его
turned
сильно
out to
очень
be a
расстроило,
very
конечно,
alone person,
что он так просто обесценился, да.
a lonely person.
Это была трагедия его жизни. Не только его,
It wasn't just
людей,
the
известных,
tragedy of his
всех
life.
практически великих
There are a lot of
людей в таком
people
настроении.
There were so many great people passing away in this state of mind. They still haven't crossed this forest, the material existence. They haven't achieved anything great. So he had written this book. So what? Has the world changed? No, it hasn't. The other one has created the revolution. Has it changed the world? So just imagine what to do to that. Even Gandhi, he wasn't happy when he died, because now the world hasn't changed for the better. Yeah, this is called spiritual power. We have to know that a person is not able to create a religion. The Supreme Lord should be called upon here. He has to be here. Who are we? We're just the servants. The Supreme Lord does everything. So in the age of Kali, Sankirtana Yagya is prescribed. So this Orthodox preacher, he didn't have it. Well, he had some prayers, of course, some spiritual practices, serving in the church, he used to talk to a lot of people, but in general he was very much disappointed. So unwillingly, some verses from Bhagavad Gita are coming to my mind. So it turns out we are always with Krishna in some sense. He never leaves us, and he is always our friend. And the one who is on the spiritual path, and if he hasn't set all these relationships with God as to a close friend, then of course this person will get disappointed sooner or later. Any more questions, dear devotees? Please raise your hands. Can you please check out if there are some questions on YouTube? So there's a question. So there are many courses right now, many trainings in order to work on your mind, the energy of money, and all such things. Should we follow these courses? Should we really follow these trainers? Well, for someone it would be a useful course, but not all of them. This is not the vector of your movement. The Vaishyas, for example, they already gifted in this regard. So yes, he can learn these things, how to make good money for the movement. Yes, he might be rich. That's a good thing, but it doesn't have to be fashion. We are the spiritual movement, where people use their own nature, and this is a normal thing. But if it's not prescribed to you by the nature, do not do it. Do whatever you have to do in this life. Remain in this spiritual path. Yeah, someone can take up all these courses, learn how to make money, how to become rich, but stay in Krishna's consciousness. But the ones who start up their own business and they forget about Krishna, it means that they're doing something wrong. It's not what they're supposed to be doing in this life. Next question. So saintly people from other traditions, can they reach spiritual world, or they have to come back and engage in devotional service? Yes, you have to be doing devotional service. Saintly people usually, this holiness that we understand, they can come up to the higher planets, the planets of the prophets that they were following. So they can go up to the planets where these prophets live. They can either stay there or go even further. But if you're not really developing, you want to develop your relationship with Krishna, you have to go back to the earth, where Krishna used to be 5,000 years ago, and immerse yourself into Krishna's pastimes. So this is the best place. But you can go to Vaikuntha even from other planets. From the higher planets, yeah, there's a method, there's a path. And of course, some devotees will take up this way. I've heard it from some other spiritual masters. Some devotees, they will go through some higher planets, although Prabhupada did not recommend it, but still it might work. And if a devotee goes to a heavenly planet, he will go back to earth, because it's almost impossible to go higher from the heavenly planets to the planets where sages live and Prajapatis, planets like Satyaloka. It's really hard to attain such planets from heavenly planets. You see, there are some subtleties. So there's a question about material desires. On the one hand, you should not repress all these desires. On the other hand, we're not supposed to stimulate these material things. So how do I live without limiting my material desires, and having this balance between the spiritual life and the material life? So balance means that when you can support yourself both spiritually and physically, materially. All the rest are just minor details. So the point is that you have to watch out that you are making your own money and you support yourself spiritually. So this is the balance. All the rest is disbalance. So if you cannot support yourself spiritually, if you do not practice spiritually, and if you do not make enough money, this is the disbalance. So, there are no questions on our channel, but if I can, I will ask another question. You've touched upon the topic of these heavenly planets. I've heard somewhere, don't remember where, for a devotee to go to the heavenly planets is like death. And if you just stay there in a heavenly planet for all this 10,000 of years, and then you'll go down to earth, this will be like a death for devotee. Is it really so that right after the heavenly planets you go down to earth again? Or you could actually go somewhere further, somewhere higher? Yeah, Prabhupada used to say about that. He said, yes, it might happen. So this will be, this might be very hard circumstances when you come back to earth after this window of the golden age, which will last for 10,000 years. So devotees will be here during the whole Kali age, up until it's over. They will be either hiding somewhere in mountains, but they will be still here. And this will be really tough for them. Really tough circumstances. As Gopal Krishna Goswami used to say when he was asked about Kali Yuga, about that time, like, how do devotees even live in the Kali Yuga age? So he said that sometimes the society of materialists, they're engaged in their problems. They have nothing to do with devotees because they just having the wars and stuff. And this is easier for the devotees to exist. They're not persecuted. And sometimes the devotees are persecuted purposely. They're looked after. Even if they just say God in the age of college, they're just killed. with no
Но поскольку всё же
with
в
no
обществе
reason.
они
So the
очень много
devotees might be
проблем
hunted
имеют,
for.
то они не могут постоянно это делать.
But since there will be so
Поэтому
many
они будут
problems
жить всю
in
Кали-югу
Kali Yuga
преданными.
age, probably all the materialists, they will be just engaged in solving their own problems.
И
And
начнется
the devotees
дефицит.
will
Но
be
это будет
existing
очень тяжелый
separately
условие.
until Kalki Avatar will come. But these circumstances, conditions
Жизнь
will be
будет
very
подземная в
hard.
основном.
So people will
Уже
be
к тому времени.
predominantly living underground
На земле будет неблагоприятно,
because
вредно
this will be
находиться.
very unfavorable and
Из-за
harmful
воздуха, из-за
to
солнца,
be living in the surface
радиации.
because of the radiation, air, the sun.
Урожая не будет такого,
There'll be
как
no
сейчас мы
harvest
ещё можем собирать, да, выращивать
as
что-то,
we still can gather.
изобилие какое-то видеть природы.
So we
Поэтому
still
не
have
будет
some abundance.
меньше и меньше будут становиться растения, плоды тоже будут.
So the
И
plants will be degrading.
больше и больше.
The
Труда
plants, the
много
trees
нужно делать. Люди, конечно,
will have
будут
to
злее,
work a lot.
потому что выживать трудно
Of course,
будет.
people will be more
Более
angry
раздраженные,
because they will have to
потомство будет
survive in
слабое,
really
жизнь будет
hard
сокращаться.
conditions.
Ну, то есть такая страшная картина, конечно.
The life
И всеобщая
span
Кали
will be
дается вот
shortened
эта
as well.
милость, да, просто произнести Хари Кришна в момент смерти.
But again, in the age of
И
Kali,
уходи отсюда.
you are given this mercy just to pronounce Hare Krishna, the name of
Вот
Krishna,
Татьяна
before
Александровна,
dying,
чуть-чуть я
and everything's going to be alright.
добавлю.
So I'd like to add something.
В Бхагавад-гите Арджуна задает
In
вопрос,
Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks a question.
поскольку Арджуна уже к тому времени
Since Arjuna
почувствовал могущество ума,
had already felt the power of his
что
mind by
не
that
так
time,
просто контролировать ум.
he's realized that it's
И он,
not so easy
естественно,
to control your
закономерный
mind.
вопрос задается
Question:
йогам, которые встал
what's
на
going to
этот
happen
путь
to yogi that is already on this path
самосознания,
of
но не
self-understanding,
довел
self-realization,
до совершенства
but he hasn't reached
и
it
отошел
to the he hasn't reached the perfection
из-за того, что чувство очень
He decided to
сильное,
leave.
очень силен.
just because his mind is too powerful.
И Кришна
The circumstances are too unfavorable.
он говорит, что
And Krishna gives him
путь
this answer.
самосознания или путь преданности
He says that the path of
могущественный,
self-realization is
что
so
на этом
powerful
пути ничего не теряется.
that nothing is
Даже
lost along the way.
небольшое продвижение по этому пути
Even a little
человеку может даровать возможность попасть на райскую планету,
movement along this path
а потом
is
вернуться
already a great
родиться
benediction.
Шриматам Шучинам,
Benediction, sorry.
богатых и чистых,
Even if you go up to some heavenly planets, you then will go back to Earth and you'll be born
из этих
in
ответов
a
я могу сделать вывод,
prosperous
что
family.
не обязательно, если там как смертноподобный,
So there's a
ни в коем случае
conclusion
не
that,
представляю рай,
of course, I do not praise heavenly
вот,
planets
призываю.
under no circumstances, and I
Просто
do not tell that
человек может
this is our
попасть туда
purpose. But
и родиться, не обязательно именно
probably
на этой
one
земле,
soul can
сейчас, которую мы видим.
enter
Просто
these
планет
planets.
много, и Кришна проводит разные свои удивительные игры в разных
Of course, there are so many
Бхагавад-гиту.
interesting
Но, скорее
leelas
всего,
of
родиться именно в
Krishna.
благоприятных условиях, независимо,
So probably even person is
кто там на дворе,
even on the heavenly
Кали-юга,
planet, and then he
или
goes
даже
down to
на
Earth.
других планетах,
He might be
когда,
born in a good family.
Сатья-юга, окропление Сатьи Начинаса. И Кришна называет, перед тем,
So
как говорит,
Krishna,
что на этом пути ничего не теряется, он называет Арджуну Тата.
he
Тата
calls
означает
Arjuna Tata,
дорогой, очень милый,
which means
мой
dear,
дорогой друг.
my dear friend.
А тот, кто
Don't worry about
прошел
it.
больший отрезок по этому пути,
And the one that has
не отправляется на
covered
разные планеты,
in a longer path,
он
he does
сразу
not go
же
to heavenly
рождается в
planets.
семьях великих континенталистов.
He is born in the families of great Vaishnavas or great transcendentalists.
Вот.
У нас появились вопросы в боте.
So we
Можно
have
я
some
продолжу
new
чуть-чуть?
questions.
Да,
Скажите, пожалуйста, если духовное развитие возможно только в обществе преданных,
So
совместное
the
воспевание,
spiritual
тем людям, то тем
development
людям, которые
is only
практикуют вне общества,
possible
разумнее будет оставить практику?
in the families of devotees. What about those who do not practice?
Индивидуальная практика.
So individual practice,
Конечно, никто не посоветует вам оставить духовную практику.
well, of course,
Коллективно, не индивидуально.
no one will tell you to leave your
Просто
spiritual
говорим об
practice.
успешности сегодня.
The point is that we're talking about
Тему затронули много.
success today, about the power,
Если вы хотите
the
служить
potency.
миссии, вам
If
нужно
you want to
научиться
serve the
этой силе
mission, you have to have this
необходимой.
potency, you have to have this energy.
И мы должны получать это от полномочий от преданных.
So we have to get it
Вот, а
from
из
the
общества
devotees.
преданных.
from associating with the devotees, sadhu sangha. Very important these days. So that's why, of course, no one should leave the spiritual practice. But if this is the correct spiritual practice, and if you really can control your mind, it will anyway take you to the society of the devotees. That would mean that you had been practicing properly. And when you practice alone and you control your mind, this is a bliss anyway. And sooner or later, it will take you to devotees again. When you start chanting mantras, that means that you are already connected with Prabhupada. He's like your Shiksha Guru. When you like reading books, you feel some progress, your life is changing, everything's okay. And then Prabhupada takes us to Diksha Guru. As a Shiksha Guru, he gives us this direction, he gives us this intelligence to allow us to see your future. Diksha Guru. So this would be the right spiritual practice. If we avoid some offense, that's okay. But if you do not avoid all the offense, you will still have some problems. You'll be worried by the weaknesses of other people. You'll be engaged in learning some things about politics and these stuff. But eventually, you'll purify yourself and you'll be useful for the whole movement, for the whole world. You will be paying no attention to all the weaknesses of people. By the mercy of your Guru and Krishna, you'll be just continuing whatever is supposed to be done. So how do you understand my purpose in this life, the one that I was born for? I mean that, is it really important for me to continue what I am doing already, or I should start over, doing something that pleases my heart? Krishna pleases our heart, associating with the devotees. Well, let's start from this, from serving, not from your professional activity. Selfless serving pleases your heart. Feel this taste. And that's when your nature will open up itself. The more you think about it, the more you get confused. Your mind is not under your control right now, so don't stress it too much. You just engage in devotional service, simple things. I came into this movement, I just didn't know what I was supposed to do. I consider myself just to be an artist. So I just started doing whatever I was asked to by the devotees. If I had this happiness, I would just go to a food store, buy some food products for the devotees. You know, I was just doing some simple things. Nothing was so challenging. And only after this, when I felt the taste of these relationships, its spirit of serving, I started having these desires. How do I preach to people? So I had this idea. How do I preach? Suddenly, I wanted to do that. Before this, I had thought that there's no chance I could become a preacher, I could preach to some people. But then they told me, why don't you try preaching? And then I thought to myself, well, maybe. It's not a bad idea. I didn't know ever that I would become a preacher, because I was afraid of it the most. I was afraid of preaching so much. Scariest thing for me back then. But since I was associated with devotees, they believed in me. They told me, no, You go, you do it.
Нет, нет, ну надо.
They told me that they believed in
Как
me.
Кришна делаешь. И они
They
меня
told me,
как-то
yeah, well,
духовно заставили
you have to
принять
do it
духовно, я не мог отказать.
for Krishna.
Я начал проповедовать, и
And I
я,
couldn't refuse
когда
it.
дал первую лекцию публичную, я сказал себе, больше никогда
So when I
так
gave
не
the
будет.
first public
Никогда
lecture,
такого не будет. Это только
I
ради
said to
преданных
myself
делал.
that
Больше
I would
никогда
never
не
go to stage again. I would never do it again, just for the devotee. I did it just for
Кришна
the
мне еще
devotees.
не говорит, о, здорово, как раз ты на своем месте, продолжай.
But then Krishna told
А
me,
я не
yeah,
знал, что это
this is
моя
great,
природа,
you're
а
on your
потом в
own.
гороскопе мне подтвердили через много лет, что это твоя
This is the
природа.
right thing you do. But then when
Смотрите, как она была
I had this
скрыта за множеством
astrological
эго, за этой стеснительностью, за этими комплексами.
session, one
Но
astrologist
служение
told me, yeah,
преданным,
this
видите,
is what I'm
помогло мне,
supposed
и
to be
преданные
doing.
мне помогли. Это милость преданных была.
See, this was the
Что мне
mercy of
вернули как
devotees.
бы эти крылья.
They brought these wings back to me. And I started
Вот
preaching.
это важно.
I
Важен
was
дух
following my
преданного
nature.
служения, не сама работа, которую выполняете,
So
а
the
дух вот этот
spirit
третий.
of this
И вот
spiritual
этот дух вас поведет.
service is very important. It will take you through all your fears, all your disagreements, all your mind analysis. It will take you through all of these things if you just listen carefully to the all the devotees.
Спасибо. И последний
Thank you very
вопрос.
much. And the last question.
Вчера медитируя, я увидел образ
So
Александра
yesterday,
Геннадьевича.
while meditating, I saw
Недавно
the
начал
image
духовную практику.
of Chaitanya
Весь
Chandra
день у меня
Charan.
болело сердце.
I just
Что
started.
могут означать образы, которые приходят при медитации?
My heart started aching. So these images that come to my head, what might they mean? I don't have any image. You see, I don't know what my image is. When I look at myself in the mirror, I don't even know who I am. This is just my material body. Well, if it helps you, I mean, my image, that's okay. If it helps you to have this spiritual practice, why not? Chant Maha Mantra. I love it more. So the more I age, the more I become older, the more I understand that I'm a soul, not this body. Well, this is a great thing. It means that you are being sincere since you have these images. You may see an image of your spiritual master while even sleeping. You may see some devotees. Of course, this is no coincidence. This is a good samskara. This is favorable for your spiritual life. Just take it as an inspiration from Krishna, as an impulse.
Хорошо. Спасибо, Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu.
Thank you, Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu, for this great katha. So I think we will finish on this.
Его милость Chaitanya Chandra Charan prabhu ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Om.
Всем удачи, дорогие преданные.
So all the best to you, and we all have a good day, dear devotees.
Карабаджану прабhu.
Да. А завтра у нас лекцию будет читать
So tomorrow
Jayapataki Prabhu.
the lecture will be
Он
given by
родился
Jayapataki
в
Prabhu.
Ташкенте.
He was born in
Сейчас
Tashkent.
живет, работает, проповедует
Now he
в
lives and
Канаде.
works and preaches in Canada.
Поэтому приходите.
So please come tomorrow. Hare Krishna.